All right, hello again, everybody. My name is Tom Bergeron. I'm the editor of ROI-NJ. Welcome to our event today. It's our thought leadership series, New Jersey's underground construction economy, bringing billions of dollars above ground. This is a special event for us. This is news and information that we want to bring out and get out to the public in the state of New Jersey, what we're doing right now. So before we start, I just want to thank the people who are responsible for helping us put this event together. I'm going to start with John Valentin, the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters. Darlene Regina, the COO of the Associated Construction Contractors of New Jersey. Richard Tolson, Director of the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Administrative District Council of New Jersey. And Kevin McCabe of the Carpenters Contractor Trust in New Jersey. So what we're going to do here today is I'm going to give each member of our panel maybe 90 seconds to introduce themselves, tell what they do. If they go too long, you just raise your hand and start yelling at them. We'll shut them down. We'll go from there. The way we like to do events here, I talked to everybody before we started. We like to have a couple of opening comments from you guys, a couple of questions, and we really want to get to the audience. You guys are here because you're concerned and care about the issue. We want to hear from you guys. We want to start a conversation here between the audience and the panel. So with that, let's start. We'll just go down the list. John, introduce yourself first.
Sure. Good morning. My name is John Valentine. I'm the Executive Secretary-Treasurer at the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters. We are the Carpenters Union that represent over 38,000 union members and highly skilled professionals over 5 states. In Delaware, Maryland, a little bit of Washington, D.C. We have trade show workers, Philadelphia, all of New Jersey, New York State, with the exception of the 5 boroughs. We manage all of our collective bargaining agreements throughout those 5 states. We're involved in safeguarding the assets of our benefit funds. Our benefit funds are 5 major funds across those 5 states with a pension, annuity, health and welfare. Total value of the pension funds is about $8 billion in total assets of the organization. We do that in a cooperative manner with the associations, our industry partners throughout those areas. We manage about 248 employees throughout the 5 areas, as well as that are mostly business representatives representing their respective areas.
Next up is Danilo Barrios, an apprentice carpenter. Thank you very much for being here. How long have you been an apprentice?
Well, I've been in 1 year as an apprentice. Yeah.
And where do you work out of?
Jersey City.
Jersey City.
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, he's going to have some great thoughts about what it was like before he's an apprentice and what he is now as an apprentice. That's going to bring a lot of insight. Next up, Darlene.
I'm Darlene Regina. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Associated Construction Contractors of New Jersey. We're an organization that represents general contractors, construction managers, specialty subcontractors in the building, heavy highway, and utility sectors of the industry. Our contractors employ tens of thousands of skilled union craft workers each year. They're responsible for putting in place billions of dollars of construction annually in the heavy highway, building, commercial, industrial sectors. As an association, our principle is, and our objectives and goals is to raise the standards of construction through integrity, responsibility, skill, and that's what brings us here today, why we're so concerned with the underground economy, because it really does nothing to help our contractors, and as we get into the discussions today, you'll see why our contractors stand apart from those that are participating in this underground economy.
One of the main reasons we're here today is because of a report that John at Stockton helped produce. Let's give a little background on what you do at Stockton and why you're here today.
Thanks. I'm John Frungen. I'm researcher at the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy at Stockton University. I worked on a report on the underground economy with Stockton economists Dr. Deborah Feigart and Oliver Cook. And before I went to Stockton, I was a long-time newspaper reporter with the Atlantic City Press, covering many worker issues.
All right, let's keep going down the line. Richard Tolson of the Bricklayers.
That's who I am. I'm Rich Tolson from the Bricklayers Union. The rest of my bio is in there, but more importantly is who I represent and why we are here today. The International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers was formed in 1865 in the city of Baltimore by 2 groups, one out of Philadelphia and one clearly from Baltimore. Their driving force, their motivation at that time was to represent workers that were being taken advantage of, to work collectively with their management partners as we do today to guarantee that 8 hours work, certainly guaranteed 8 hours pay, that if a worker left his house in the morning, that he had the ability to come home in the afternoon in the same condition that he left, and that there was an opportunity to retire in dignity. 152 years later, those battles continue. They haven't progressed. They've regressed from times when labor was much stronger, but today they are the battles that we're fighting every day. I have the pleasure of and the honor of sitting on the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy, and with the Carpenters Union and with our management partners, we're able to initiate this study. They did a great job, and the results of that study is why we're here, and most importantly, to get that message out that we need a level playing field in the state of New Jersey once again.
All right, so we're ROI-NJ, but when we do our events, we leave no stone unturned on where we get people. So we're going to bring Kevin here, who we probably should have brought out for our cannabis event series that we're doing. Kevin's from Colorado, he's a professor at Colorado State. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about why you're here today.
Hi, my name's
Why
Kevin.
on earth you would leave Colorado to come to New Jersey?
My name's Kevin Duncan. I'm a professor of economics at Colorado State University in Pueblo. And in addition to that position, I've also been a visiting professor or a visiting scholar at the Institute for Research on Labor and Employment at UC Berkeley. I've done a lot of research on prevailing wage laws. My academic research has appeared in the leading journals published through Cornell University, UC Berkeley, and then University of Reading in the United Kingdom. A lot of my research is used to inform policy. My research has been used in about 20 states to inform policy on construction labor market policy. And it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for including me on the panel.
Good stuff. All right, John Fridgen, we're going to start with you. Let's talk about the report. Let's get some of the key elements of what we did, what we're talking about, and why this issue is so important to the state of New Jersey.
Sure. The main aim of this report was to document that there is an underground economy in the construction industry in New Jersey and to estimate its size. And what we found was very much clear evidence that people are working off the books, people are being misclassified as if they are independent contractors when they're clearly not, and that millions of dollars in taxes and unemployment insurance is just not being paid. The numbers are pretty eye-popping, I thought. When we talk about the size of the underground construction economy, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but goes as high as $1.2 billion. Estimated 35,000 workers working underground. Now, that's more than the entire population of Princeton. Wages, about up to $500 million in wages being earned underground that are just not being taxed. We've lost at least $20 million in income taxes that are not being paid from work off the books and through misclassification. And up to $7 million in unemployment insurance is not being paid. So this is money that should be circulating through the New Jersey economy, and it's not. This is also money that keeps the middle class strong. We're talking about middle class workers who are working at a disadvantage. Their companies go for bids and they can't compete because unscrupulous contractors are not playing by the same rules. One of the highlights we found was in terms of enforcement. The state does 35,000 inspections in the field each year, but they're trying to monitor 100,000 businesses that are registered to do work on public projects. We're talking 600 school boards, over 500 municipalities, state agencies. 25 field inspectors are trying to monitor all that activity, and it's just, too much. And so the unions have said, we don't really need many new laws or a lot of new laws here. We need the laws on the books to be enforced. And it would be self-funding. These fines that are levied against the unscrupulous contractors, they go and fund the enforcement activities. So with more enforcement, you would get more money and it would pay for itself. A lot of other states are more aggressive in policing this and in policing misclassification. Our report has recommendations, but I think I'll stop right there. And
so I'm going to turn to Darlene. You hear the report, you've seen the report, you've heard the numbers, but you're also dealing with something individually on the job every day with your union and what you're doing. What's your first reaction when that kind of information comes out? Did you have any understanding that it was that big? I mean, obviously we knew this was an issue. How does this impact your union?
Well, we knew it was that big, and I am speaking on behalf of the contractors. So our contractors, the contractors that we represent, they don't compete in that market, in the underground world. They can't compete, nor do they want to, because mainly they're very different. The employees that work for them, they care about them. They work for them for a long time. They start with them sometimes as apprentices, and they end up retiring from their companies as foremen or superintendents. They invest in their employees. They invest in bringing new apprentices and having their journeymen and more skilled journeymen and foremen spend time to mentor those apprentices. They care, they pay them a living wage. They make sure they're paying into health insurance programs for them and retirement benefits so that they can raise families while they're working with them and hopefully even retire here someday. So there's a whole different mindset and culture in the contractors that we represent than the contractors that work in this underground world. And, while they're out trying to find workers to pay off the books, our members are giving back to their communities. They're giving back. They help with outreach to young men and women, minority and women into the trades. So they invest a lot, not only in their communities, but in the industry because they care about this industry. They're family-owned companies. They've been in business an average of 50 to 75 years. So it's just a whole different mindset. And that world, and as that world gets bigger, it really just makes it more difficult for them to continue to operate and to continue to offer not just jobs, but careers to people who are interested in getting into this industry.
So, John, I'm going to turn to you because the Carpenters just opened up a beautiful training apprentice facility just a couple of months ago. You guys are clearly investing in your workers, investing in the union, investing in putting out superior products by superior people. When you saw those numbers on that report, everything that you're doing and thinking some people are trying to skirt that issue, how does that impact what you guys are trying to accomplish in New Jersey for what you're doing for your employees?
Well, certainly it undermines the entire industry, and that was a major concern. For the Carpenters Union, we had recognized that this had been going on in the industry for quite some time. We did not realize that the numbers were as significant as they are mentioned in the report, but we certainly knew they were very large numbers, and that we were going to have an uphill battle. One of the things that we're concerned with is, just as Darlene said, it undermines not only the entire industry, it strips away from everything that we're trying to build upon. Putting out highly qualified carpenters and being able to train them, have them going through a 5-year apprenticeship program, have them become very professional, highly proficient carpenters. When you're an independent contractor, you don't have that opportunity to go through such training programs. The other thing it does is it strips away a lot of fairness within the industry. People like Danello, who had worked as an independent contractor, who just recently came in as a union carpenter, didn't have those opportunities. And the story that he tells and the struggles that he had on the job site were very compelling with regards to what actually occurs out in the industry when you have people skirting the system. It's about economics. The whole report is really about economics and the numbers that are being circumvented throughout the industry for the state of New Jersey, for unfair competition within the industry with the contractor base, where they no longer, as Darlene said, we don't even want to compete in that market. They can't compete in that market anymore. So it leaves them with an unfair disadvantage as well. So when we look at this with regards to our training center, and you started the question with the training center, it's not just about the training center.
It's about the industry as a whole. It's about the monies that the economics of the industry coming into the state as revenue. It's about the unfair disadvantage for our contractors that are within that same marketplace. It's about the tragic story that independent contractors go through and the difficulties they have, sometimes not even knowing it in the industry, and the struggles that they have. And it's about fairness. It's about doing the right thing. It's about making sure that, as Rich Tolson said, people go to work, they earn a fair day's wages, they go to work safe, they come home to their families, they contribute into training programs, they contribute into their communities, that they're part of an overall industry. When you really see this actually really difficult, which is actually shocking, is when you see independent contractors utilized on prevailing wage projects, public work projects. And then not only does the state not receive the wages the taxes from the wages that would come into the coffers of the state and help move the state forward, but also they strip away the ability for the industry to have highly skilled, qualified carpenters and contractors on their job, but also they cheat the general public because those wages are prescribed by law to be paid on job sites. And that doesn't happen all the time when people are circumventing it, as misclassified contractors.
Richard, I've seen you shaking your head in agreement, nodding with everything people are saying. Let's talk about the Bricklayers and this report and what you see and how that's impacting your union.
A few things to follow up on some of the comments that have already been made. One by John, this isn't a new issue. 10 years ago, our union offered to every federal legislator in the state of New Jersey a bus tour of what we see every day. 10 years ago, fast forward, that invitation remains unanswered. Anybody who leaves here today skeptical of what might be going on, jump in my car, I'll take you to Jersey City, and I'll show you going on today. We fought that battle all last week, and I don't mean to just pick on Jersey City. It's going on throughout the state of New Jersey, but it's certainly going on there because we witnessed it all last week. The effects on our union. We went from a high in 2008, 2009 of 2.4 million man-hours statewide to a low in 2013 of 900,000 hours. Times the total package of, on average, of $70 an hour. That's over 1 million man-hours a year. That's $70 million a year times 15 building trades craft. Adds up to a lot of dollars. When you say this to our legislators, the people we elect to defend the rights of their constituents, it really opens their eyes. But we haven't had a lot of movement on that until most recently. Last Thursday at the Carpenters Training Center, Governor Murphy signed the executive order to create a task force led by Commissioner Rob Angelo. That is welcomed wholeheartedly by the building trades, especially by those represented here today that pushed hard and made these recommendations over the course of the campaign. But that has changed lives. The reduction in contributions to our training fund, that is a joint labor management agreement, and I can't stress that enough. We agreed to do this with our partners. It isn't that we demand it. We sit down together, we negotiate it, we see the value of training for the future, and we contribute to that fund jointly. The reduction in 1 million man-hours times that contribution rate, whether it's a nickel or whether it's $1, adds up and reduces our ability to do training. There isn't a municipality in the state of New Jersey that we go into, that our employers go into that want to do jobs, especially if there are stipulations, pilot programs, PLAs, things like that, that they don't want givebacks to their residents, rightfully so to their residents, to give them opportunity not just for a job, but for a career. The building trade unions offer those careers. That differentiates us again from our competition that offers a job. We offer careers, but we have to have the dollars coming in to sustain that kind of training, to sustain that first-class, state-of-the-art type of facility the Carpenters have. We have 2 of them here in the state of New Jersey that we're very proud of. But that's the effect on our ability to provide that opportunity. The effect on our members, and I'll conclude quickly, is much more dire. It's much more personal.
So let's talk. Sorry, go ahead.
There's not a labor leader in here that hasn't had the misfortune of sitting across the desk from somebody who was going to lose their home. That's somebody that was suffering from some sort of addiction, that hasn't faced suicide due to the inability to be able to go to work. And then again, that affects not only us, but our management partners as well, because when they can't compete, they can't provide jobs, we can't send people to work. And the state suffers all along with that.
All right, so let's take this to a personal side. I'm going to bring Danella in. And you were an underground worker, for lack of a better term, and about a year ago you joined The Apprentice. Let's talk about before and after. Talk about your life before you became an apprentice.
Well, I started working in construction in 2012. It was really new to me. I didn't know anything, inexperienced, and straight on my first job, they asked me to be a translator because I knew English and Portuguese, so I would have to speak with the contractors, and it was all new to me, and I was a young guy learning everything, and I picked up the jobs as I went,
Sort of self-taught, though.
Self-taught, right? Basically, and it was rough. I whatever job that I've gone through, I have to see what's going on, pick it up, and try to do it as efficiently as I could, and always fast paced. You're working in with a whole bunch of guys, and you had to get the job done as quick as possible. And they didn't really, I guess safety wise, that was usually you're supposed to have that at first. That would be last. In non-union.
Now, as I understand, non-union, you suffered an injury and you got hurt and you had nowhere to go, correct?
Yeah. That was actually before I got into the union, where I was going down the stairs. The contractor asked me to go downstairs because we needed to get the concrete going. So I was going down the stairs and there was a slime on the stairs where I thought it was like regular water. Right. It was transparent, and I didn't really see it, and I slipped on that. I stayed a long time with my leg hurting, and it was an unbearable pain. Couldn't run, couldn't jump, but I had to work, right. Because I wasn't covered. I had to go to work with my leg, in pain. So.
All right, Kevin, let's turn to you. You've heard the New Jersey side. You've heard unions. You've heard the workers. Let's talk about, from a societal issue, what you're seeing on this, how this impacts not just society, but economies, how the Northeast differs from other areas. I'll let you give the big picture.
Well, first, before I get into the social cost, everyone here said something about training, the effect of this on training in the industry, and that's really kind of a silent cost. It's vocal here, but it's almost hidden elsewhere, is that when an underground contractor who spends nothing on training displaces a contractor who spends money on training. You have fewer resources going into training. You have a deterioration of the skill base of the construction industry. That's a broad economic effect because you need to have a skilled workforce to build the infrastructure for the state. And if that sector grows, the consequences are that you have less skill development and investment in New Jersey. That means owners, if they need to have a skilled workforce, are going to have to increasingly look outside of the state. So more work is going to be done by out-of-state contractors and construction workers, and that's going to reduce economic activity. So that's a significant cost to the industry. Also, the research on prevailing wage laws and training indicates that when you have prevailing wage laws and you have training, you have fewer injuries in the industry. And that's a significant cost, as Danilo mentions. There are broad social costs when construction workers are paid less in the industry. I've conducted several studies at the national level, regional level, comparing labor market outcomes when workers earn prevailing wage laws and when they don't. And as you can imagine, when construction worker wages are lower, poverty rates are higher. There's an increased dependence on public forms of insurance and benefits, more food stamp use. Also, there's an economic impact when you have these underground contractors employing networks of workers from other states or other countries. You have less work done by workers in the area. So then you have a reduced economic activity because of that. So a contractor who engages underground activity may benefit by having an increased profit, but the rest of society pays a higher cost. Taxpayers are going to have a higher burden because of greater poverty and tax revenue spent on those types of policies, and then reduced economic activity.
All right, we said we're going to do a lot of questions, so I'm going to start looking to the audience. I'm going to ask the first one because I'm going to ask the elephant in the room. I'm going to turn to John and say, okay, so we've heard a lot of good things about the underground economy. We've heard about training. We've heard about safety. But somebody out there in the back of the mind saying, okay, this is just unions. Is this union versus non-union? Is this making sure unions get all the work? Is it that issue? You know, how do you solve that problem? Because I know the type of things you guys are doing. I've seen the training center you've got, but still, that's going to be out there. How would you address that?
Yeah, and that's a big concern. I mean, certainly, the study speaks for itself. That's a concern from the unions as well. That when we talk about misclassification of workers, that people don't think of it, as a union versus non-union, because it's not about that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with, as we said earlier, the economics of the industry, the tax revenue to the state of New Jersey, the fairness for a contractor to bid on an equal playing field and not have their industry undermined, where they can have a fair, competitive process to bid on work. It's for young men who don't have the ability to have workman's compensation and to be able to have a safe work environment, be able to go to work, not have to struggle from what I was told by Danilo, months with pain because he couldn't afford to go to the doctor because he had no workman's compensation. It's about not laying the tax liability onto an individual. It's about paying fair and proper taxes. It's also about, all of the things with the social issues, the training, but it's really not a union versus non-union issue. And then certainly want to stress that. And that's one of the things we were always concerned about as a union, not only from the carpenters, but the masons as well, that we did not want this ever to be a union versus non-union. We've been dealing with this for years. And this has been a major focus for us to make sure that workers are protected. But everybody has equity in this. This is everybody's responsibilities, within the industry. It needs to be monitored. People need to be educated about it. They need to understand. Most young men coming in, as you've heard, or women, they don't realize what they're being put into. When somebody is as he had said, he was directed to do work. People are shirking their responsibilities as good industry partners within an industry, and they're laying it on a young man who is a good hard worker, wants to learn a craft, but he's put in as a position that he's the contractor and responsible by bearing the burden of their responsibilities. That's what it's about. It's about a contractor association that trains their association and their members on how to comply with the law. That's the main focus with them. They make sure that their contractors are complying with the law, working with industry partners, helping build and training centers, helping to make the industry better. And then they have people on the outside that undermine that completely. But it's not just a union a concern. That's what it is with the union, a concern. But it's a major issue for the state. It's a major issue for the industry. It's a major issue, and we all have a responsibility to protect a young man that he can go to work, potentially in a dangerous business, get hurt, and not bear the burden of somebody else's responsibility. That's what this is about. It's about being on a job site and going home and being able to have the appropriate training and not be in a position because you're bilingual and all of a sudden, hey man, you're the next contract out here because you can speak to both us and the workforce. So we're going to make you a contractor. And by the way, with that, you're going to pay your own taxes. Probably didn't even realize the tax liability he had when he signed on to be an independent contractor. That's really what the major concern is. And we all in this room, we all have an obligation to protect our industry. We all have an obligation to make sure we monitor the industry. And we all have an obligation to make sure the industry grows and that we're able to make sure that we're protecting workers' rights. I'll finish with this. The state of New Jersey, nobody should be in a position where they can't have health care for themselves and at least the ability that they can retire someday with dignity. That's really what this is about. It's about the dignity of a worker. It's about a dignity of an individual, and it's about fairness and equity for good business owners to compete fairly without being undermined. That's really what this is about. It has nothing to do with the union. It has to do with fairness, and it has to do with equity.
Question? Yes, sir.
It's more of a comment. My name is Ravi Sadaraju. I'm an attorney. I bring class actions on behalf of workers, and a large part of my practice is representing people who've been misclassified as independent contractors. John and Danilo, to your point, the majority of my cases come from workers' comp attorneys who are representing people who've been so badly injured and can't work anymore because of the unsafe conditions and the huge number of hours these people are working with no overtime. A couple of things I wanted to comment on is just as someone who's litigating these issues in courts. New Jersey law, someone said, we should just enforce the law on the books. New Jersey law is woefully inadequate in this area. Compared in New Jersey, under our New Jersey wage and hour law, you can only go back 2 years for unpaid overtime or unpaid wages. So even if you're working somewhere for 6 years, you can only go back 2 years. Compare that to Massachusetts, which is 3, and there's no penalty. The only penalty is interest. There's no liquidated or treble damages. In Massachusetts, you go back 3 years and you get triple the damages. So if you haven't paid overtime, the employer's looking at paying triple in penalties. In New York, you go back 6 years and you get double. So I've had my own firm for 9 years, and unfortunately, I started my firm the year Chris Christie became governor. So the chance of amending these laws was nil. But this is something we need to fix in the state because we have to be able to go into court and have some teeth to say, look, we need to get these workers what they're owed, and the employer who hires these people, there's some disincentive there. I just want to talk a little bit about the point Danella was making about the techniques these people are using. Is a lot of times they're setting up these layers because they'll say, oh, well, I represent a lot of truck drivers all right along here who are working 70 hours a week. They get to these warehouses at 5 a.m. They're delivering furniture, doing backbreaking work. They're working until 6:30 a.m., 5 or 6 days a week. They're wearing shirts that say, Williams-Sonoma or Macy's or these big retailers. They're going to work where Williams-Sonoma's name is on the building. They're handling their paperwork. They're delivering their products to their customers. I'm bringing these lawsuits, and these companies are saying, no, they're not our employees. These are individual guys. And what they're doing is, I represented one company, the case settled for about $2 million, where someone came in and said, I want to be a truck driver. My friend said I could drive a truck. They're like, okay, you have to incorporate. They made them incorporate. And then they said, you have to lease a truck from a facility that's right on our property. And then, all right, you lease the truck. We're going to pay you $1,000, but we're going to deduct the cost of renting your truck, the cost of the insurance, the cost of your uniform. If there are any products that are damaged, we're going to deduct that too. By the way, you have to hire a helper if you need. Obviously, these are 2-person jobs to deliver this stuff. And they're saying, well, it's up to you if you want to hire a helper or not. Of course, you have to hire a helper. You can't carry a mattress by yourself. So you have to hire. These people are paying the cost of hiring a helper. So some of these people are coming into this situation with the best of intentions, saying, hey, I want to start a trucking company. But they're being paid, $700 a week to do that, but that's deducting all these costs. As people working 70 hours a week are netting $200 or $300. So that piece of it, it's absolutely appalling. And what's happening is it's becoming, people are seeing, well, I'm a driver. They just think this is the way it is. And I've represented people where they're saying, well, I'm a contractor. I'm not an employee. And the test in New Jersey, it's not how you designate yourself or how your employer designates you. It's based on what the legal test is. Now, luckily in New Jersey, the legal test was called the ABC test for who is and is not a contractor, and it's very pro-employee. But there is more we have to do in order to get our laws up to snuff.
So, Darlene, I'll turn to you. What would be your suggestions to help with that? Who's a contractor? Who's not? How are the classification issues? What are some of the things that we can do to change that?
Well, we do have laws on the books. We do have misclassification laws. As we mentioned, the governor did sign an executive order last week that we're hoping will make a difference to address some of that, where the different agencies will work together to identify misclassification and to bring it to a point where it's dealt with properly. Misclassification is huge. And, going back to, for many years, I spoke with many contractors about the challenges they have competing in this market, basically having to walk away from certain sectors where the underground economy has grown to such a point where it's just not possible to compete. But every time they say they have, and because this goes back to whether it's a union or a non-union issue, they have clearly said over and over again, they have no problem competing against a non-union contractor who plays by the rules from start to finish. They feel they're more competitive because they do tap into a highly skilled and trained workforce, and they see that as the backbone and the key to their success. And it's just when you can misclassify, when you can, pay underground, you pay people off the books, you can skirt paying workers' compensation. That's where they just can't compete. So it's really a matter, yes, I agree, like maybe there's some things we need to look into, like workers' comp, and those issues, and maybe now is a time that we will be able to do that. But there are a lot of good laws on the books that just need to be enforced and across the board.
Richard, jump in on that. I know you're big on the enforcement and how much.
A couple things quickly. One, we have a handout out on the table that addresses some of the issues that are raised, some of the suggestions that we made, both on our own and with the Carpenters and with our management partners to the administration. Clearly, last Thursday, the governor took a step in that direction with the Commissioner of Labor to make sure that those things get adopted. The laws we have, and we cite Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York as examples. We're just not identifying a problem. We're offering potential solutions. So ours is specific to the construction industry. But seeing that we're naming names, there are criminal enterprises operating in the state of New Jersey on the backs of workers that are amassing wealth and being hailed in their communities as upstanding citizens that are building boys and girls clubs, that are making donations to the local churches, and that they're great citizens. They're doing it on the backs of workers and human rights violations. We had an outreach in Newark last summer where a young man in his mid-20s was working for Concrete Systems, and I'm going to name names because they need to be named, because they're criminal enterprises that are breaking the law, and it's been going on far too long. This isn't a non-union issue. This is a criminal issue that's going on and is finally being addressed in New Jersey. This young man came in after Mass at a church in Newark. We were doing outreaches after the three marriages. 25 years old or so, was working for Concrete Systems, and was told us that his employer told him, if you want to stay working for me, you have to change your name. Anybody have that happen to him recently? Anybody have heard of that happening since the early 1900s? Well, it's happening today in the state of New Jersey. And the laws we have are about to be enforced, but these criminal enterprises need to be taken down. And as the governor said last week, he's going to throw a 98-mile-an-hour fastball right underneath somebody's chin, and we look forward to that.
Kevin, we know about the rough and tumble Northeast. Let's talk about how this issue is handled in other parts of the country.
Did that sound rough and tumble? I'm sorry.
The 98-mile-an-hour fastball, yes. Talk about the West, talk about the South, talk about the Midwest, talk about other areas and how they're addressing this issue.
On the private side, I think it's largely an enforcement issue, like Darlene was mentioning. To the extent that this happens in public construction on prevailing wage projects, in California, they have the state a while back, a couple of years ago, made certified payrolls publicly available information, which helps a lot. It's an easy way for a worker to check, or for anyone to check, that the number of workers on the job matches up with the number of workers that are on the payroll. I don't know if that to me would discourage underground contractors from cheating on public jobs. There are things that can be done, I think, to discourage underground contractors from participating. One would be making payrolls publicly available information. And the other thing is to borrow from responsible bid ordinances or best value contracting that establishes criteria other than the low bid as the basis of winning a project. The contractors, it's kind of pre-qualification characteristics. This would be something that would be done on a state or a publicly funded project, but their legal history, their label history, their safety history as a pre-qualification for bidding on a public project might help screen those contractors out of public construction projects.
Questions, anyone? Questions? Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Bill Sproul with the Carpenters. I'd like to make a statement first and then also possibly direct a question to Mr. Duncan because of his knowledge on a national level. This problem, basically 10, 15 years ago.
Thank you. This problem was not as prevalent as we see it now, and it's not really a prevailing wage issue here in New Jersey. With the prevailing wage enforcement, we do pretty good. The Trenton people do pretty good down there with the enforcement. It's very limited. The private sector has become an epidemic, okay? On a national level, they estimate $2 trillion annually is exchanged in the underground economy, and over 65% of that is in the construction industry. And those numbers have grown. Now, what's happening here in New Jersey, you have a $22 billion construction industry, which is a major part of the GDP here in this state. And this 35,000 member workforce that's in the underground economy has grown significantly, and it continues to grow. And it's not about prevailing wage. As Darlene mentioned, we can compete. The unions have programs. They have rates for different market segments. It's not all about the highest rates. There's residential rates. There's other things that we can do to be on smaller projects. But this is growing to where they're doing multi-million-dollar projects. And the profit margins that these unscrupulous contractors are getting, guess what the number is? Somebody take a guess. What's a union sub goes for a 10% profit margin on a job is something pretty decent. The profit margin for these unscrupulous contractors is 100%. 100% profit on the backs of the workers that they are exploiting. So I guess my question to Mr. Duncan and any of the other panelists that would like to interject is, look at where we've gone in the past 10 to 15 years, how this has grown from the residential part of the industry now to multi-million-dollar commercial projects. Where would we be in another 10 years if this goes unchecked?
Business.
That's what the public needs to know.
To the extent that the underground contractor displaces the training contractor, you have a deterioration of skills. That's not. That's a harmful trend that's an economy-wide problem. Like Danilo mentioned, there's no training going on in the underground side. There's nothing set aside, no resources set aside for training. So that's probably the largest impact, is the deterioration of skills as that sector grows. Then there's also the increased social costs. There's the Stockton study outlined the fiscal impact, and that may awaken governments, is that if businesses aren't contributing fairly to tax revenue, I think that's probably the greatest lever to use to correct the problem. But basically just a downhill slide in terms of tax revenue, skills, training, quality of work, I don't think that would stop it as much as the fiscal impact will stop it. That's something that might unify all sides, is that if you can show that these businesses are not contributing fairly to tax revenue, that may get everyone interested in limiting it.
So, John, I'm going to turn to you. We're talking about a lot of dollars here and a lot of money. And I've never met a politician or a municipality or a mayor or a freeholder who wasn't looking for more money, right? Everybody wants that. This is money that's right out there. Why isn't more being done? Why aren't they taking a look at this and saying, seeing the report that you guys put out and said, hey, we're missing something here. We should be doing A, B, and C. What's the hesitation?
Well, I think we're in a political period where ideology drives a lot of policy discussion. And so if you're of a party that is pro-business, you don't want to upset people who might be your contributors or who are on the business side. But I think one of the problems that you asked, Bill, what happens 10 years from now? These jobs that are being hurt are solid middle-class jobs. I mean, these are families who are able to live in good communities, contribute taxes, and we keep hearing about income inequality widening. Well, these are middle-class families who are being hurt. And the more we lose the middle class in New Jersey, the less ability we have to fund the budget, to pay the taxes, to basically build our community. So I think that's a social cost that maybe is a little bit invisible, but over the long haul, it's going to really hurt the state.
Now, there hasn't been a politician alive who hasn't campaigned about strengthening the middle class. That's the easiest solution. We're about the middle class. We're about incomes. That's what we want to do. So let's talk about Governor Murphy, who has been very big on this. And let's be fair, I've had union people say, look, Governor Christie, for everything he did, also created a lot of union jobs. Let's talk about Murphy coming into office, some of the things that he's done already, some of the things he's campaigned on. Is there a sense of optimism that there's a chance that some of this could turn? Anybody can jump in.
Yes. Yes, there is. We've actually borrowed some of his campaign language in some of our promotions about creating a fairer, safer, and smarter economy. We know in our industry we've been affected by robotics, surprisingly enough. I mean, especially in the concrete industry. That started changing 15, 20 years ago. It's starting to come into the brick industry, panelization, prefabrication, all those things have changed our industry, and we're adapting with it. But the governor has taken that first step, actually preceded by the appointment of a very knowledgeable, a very caring, and a very aggressive commissioner of labor. And that is encouraging, I think, for all the building trades, and not just on the prevailing wage side. It was stated here by a couple. We can compete there because it's more of a level playing field. Not to say there aren't people out there cheating, but there are. But on the private sector side, as I mentioned before, the job we were demonstrating at last week in Jersey City is 46 stories. These are jobs that no more than 5 years ago, the developers, like the Fields of the world and the Iron States and others, were making profits on building them with good, qualified, trained, and safe labor from the building trades. Now they're doing it for rates that were being paid 25 years ago. They're paying bricklayers on this job $18 an hour and cement finishers $18 an hour to go 46 stories in the air. This is going backwards. So, yeah, we welcome the governor's efforts. We welcome the governor's desire to listen to the people that are actually in here. I took the bold step a few weeks ago to tell the Commissioner of Labor that me and my colleagues have been doing this 20, 30, 40 years. He's been on the job 4 months. Maybe we have something wise to say.
I'm guessing that went over well.
He wasn't in the room. And I don't know if it was relayed to him or not, but it's how we truly feel. We have a wealth of wisdom and experience that we can share with him that will truly make it a fairer, safer, and smarter economy.
John, you look like you want to jump in.
Just very quickly, what's great what he's doing in New Jersey, but New Jersey is not an island. That a lot of this problem crosses state lines, and we hear workers, live in one state, work in another. So one of the recommendations in the report was to have better coordination between the states, so that you have these contractors who kind of switch things around when things get hot in one place and move, and better coordination, knowing who's doing what, helping police better.
So I have a comment, and as far as the workers is concerned, because I think Danilo's story is very common and very compelling, and that's what happens when, now you're talking about strengthening the middle class. The majority of those workers are actually working poor. They get paid a fraction of what they're really supposed to be paid, and they're not in the middle class, and they'll never be in the middle class because they don't have a pathway to the middle class. So I want to bring it back to the workers, because when they're not paid what they're rightfully supposed to be paid, they depend on government services. And this goes along every industry. Not so much in the construction industry, because the majority of them are in the shadows. So I think that the contractor piece is very important, and kudos, and we should applaud the contractors that are doing the right thing. But this industry affects everyone. It affects communities, because when folks are not paid correctly, they can't get out of poverty. They can't take care of their children well. And the majority of them are working probably 10, 11 hours a day and not being paid what they're supposed to be paid. So the social impact of this whole thing in the communities where these big stories and these projects are being built is significant. We actually had an issue as well in Jersey City, and we did a community forum, and we were surprised at how many people in the community came out from stakeholders like the NAACP, ministers, and so forth. And so we found now that creating strategic partnerships with community-based organizations and ministers and stakeholders like advocacy groups helps in order to educate and let these workers know that they do have options and that they can speak up, because a lot of them don't.
So I'm going to ask Danilo a question. So let's talk about, we know that your life is improved. We know that you have benefits. We know that you have training. But we also know that you're still probably connected to some of the people that were in your previous life in the underground economy. Are you doing a little bit of recruiting? Are you telling people, hey, look, I went over here and everything's better and I have a future and I'm getting trained, right? For all we talk about politicians, for all we talk about developers, eventually at one point you're going to grab your buddies and say, look, you guys are in the wrong place. You need to be over here. Is any of that going on?
Yeah, actually, not just me, but they're asking me as well. They're calling me, hey, how has it been, and they want to get in, and I'm like, yes, I'm gonna try to get you all in. People that I met at the job that I'm working at, there's some guys that are non-union. He was like, you gotta help me, Nobody wants to stay regular carpenter, laborer, or anything. They want to get into union because they know how, union helps, and where they're at, they're not going to go anywhere. So I've been trying to help everybody as I can.
Yeah, sure. John, I'm going to turn to you and talk about when changing this issue. You've got three entry points that I see it. There's the worker themselves, right, trying to say this is better. There's the developers that I know you guys were talking to, and there's the politicians that you're trying to work with the legislation. Which area is the most effective that you do more? What are the pros and cons of each? How do you handle that?
I think they're all important. I mean, all the workers do need to be educated about the pitfalls of being pulled into that misclassification of workers. They need to understand what those pitfalls are, and that's really where it starts. But as I had said earlier, everybody has to be involved in this, because it's such a major issue. It's going to take everybody's involvement. From the contractors, them policing within their own industry as well, making sure that they educate their industry partners as well. With the elected officials, I don't want to say politicians, the elected officials, people that are there that have the ability to affect change. It's extremely important that they understand these issues. Governor Murphy came in and in a very short period of time recognized that this was a major issue, not only for the state, but for workers and workers' rights. And he also recognized it was the contractors, because it wasn't just unions that he spoke to, and it wasn't just workers that he spoke to. He spoke to industry partners. He spoke to the people that it mostly affects. Because the union is terrific. It's a great organization. It's a collective strength of workers coming together. But they need one thing to be successful: good, strong contractors that work within in the confines of the law and that are able to employ them. When a good union contractor or business person no longer can compete within the industry, it hurts everybody. The elected officials should know this. They should be able to serve their community well by being able to bring in additional revenue. You know, we talked about the middle class, and you know, Governor Murphy, I'll quote him. You know, he said the pathway, the door to the, most people have entered the door to the middle class through the unions. You know, and when you talk about the middle class and you talk about people being exploited, because they're actually being exploited out on the job site, you know, when you start drawing down on the middle class, the people that are left in the middle class, they're starting to bear that burden. All right? Now they got to pick up and shoulder more responsibility. And that's what it's about, shouldering that responsibility. And it becomes a cascading effect. You're putting too much downward pressure on it. Something has to happen. Governor Murphy recognized it. He recognized that a great workforce is a highly skilled, educated workforce, and that there are apprenticeship programs out there in vocational education that should be utilized, that people should understand the issues, and that we should comply with the laws. And he put a task force together, not only just to look at it and help with enforcement, but to study and advise. He'll advise the elected officials, advise the departments, and to make sure that they're able to come back with suggestions on how those laws would change. There is another end part to this as well, is the end users. The people that the carpenters serve and the workers serve their contractors. They serve the developer serves the end users. They should have knowledge of it as well. This is an issue for all. You know, when people are skirting their responsibilities within the industry, somebody has to shoulder the responsibility. And the burden has become too great for good, strong contractors that are working with that are legitimate workforce and legitimate contractors out there. It's too much of a responsibility to shoulder anymore. So it's really everybody's issue.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions, or I can go to the close. So here's what I want to do. I want to ask you guys, we're talking about the money, we're talking about solving all of these issues. So I'm going to give each of you guys an opportunity. If you could talk to one person in the state, whether it's a governor, whether it's a big developer, whether it's a mayor, whether it's a contractor, what would you say? And you would tell them, hey, you should do this, because if you do, it will help the economy in this way. So Kevin, that's a convoluted question, so I'm going to go to the academics to say, who would you tell and what would you tell them to solve an issue?
I would think the governor would need to understand the importance of this to the industry, to skill development in the industry, because look what an economy is. It's infrastructure. The other would be maybe a general appeal to politicians in general, is the fiscal impact. Stockton University study shows the tax revenue reduction associated with that. That hurts the state. And I think those two things are important levers to get politicians motivated.
Richard, let's go to you. Who are you talking to? You're talking to everybody.
Pretty much. Have been for a long time, too. But what we need to do is expose those that are making the most money. And it's been going on. Some I have mentioned, many others are amassing large fortunes on the back of exploited workers. We need to expose them. Rental rates haven't come down. Lease rates haven't come down. People are making record profits, and they're doing it. These are the same people that no more than 5 years ago were building union. Where's their profit coming from? There's only one place. Material costs the same. They're making it on the backs of labor. So we have already spoken to the governor. We have friends in the legislature that get it, that live it every day. But I think the next element of our initiative is to talk to the general public, educate the general public, that there are those at the very top that are making all the money, that are taking advantage, not just union workers, all workers. The International Union of Bricklayers, now Craft Workers, was formed to represent all trowel trades, not just union workers. We welcome everybody. Our outreach is there. We want to bring in more workers like Danilo and his brothers and sisters in the community. So it's a universal message that won't be solved by one silver bullet. But by spreading that message, by identifying the bad players, and by calling on the good conscience of all the citizens in New Jersey, we think we can make a change for the workers and for our industry.
John, you're shaking vigorously. Who are you talking to? Who are you shoving that report in front of and saying, you got to see this? This is the money you're losing.
I'm going to piggyback on what Rich just concluded, that I'll leave it to very smart people to talk to the politicians. I want to talk to the average person in New Jersey who may think this is a victimless crime, that there's not a whole lot of harm, that it doesn't really affect them because they don't work in the industry. And it's an issue that affects all of New Jersey. It affects everyone who pays taxes, affects anyone who has work done. It affects anyone who knows people in their community who are being cheated or losing income and not being able to maintain their middle-class lifestyle. So that's who I would talk to, the average person, to understand that this is affecting the entire state.
Well, I would speak to the governor as the leader of the state to basically say that this is a problem that we can no longer turn our head on. We can no longer brush it under the carpet as it's a union versus non-union issue. This is a problem because if we don't do something to stop this underground economy from growing, we're going to lose good contractors who offer people who want to go into the construction trades a career, a lifetime career, where they can stay here and they can live here. There will always be construction jobs, but that's exactly what they'll be. It will be a job. It will be a job where they'll get $10, $15, $20 an hour. They'll have no benefits. They'll have no way to really sustain any kind of a lifestyle here. And it will have a very, very negative impact on our state's economy and on just the overall well-being of even living in New Jersey. So we really need to do something to address it now and not let this grow any further.
I'm going to ask you, if you went back to the underground economy, some of those sites that you were on before you became an apprentice, and you could talk to the supervisors and the heads and the engineers that are running the place, what would you tell them to say, hey, I've seen the other side, this is what you guys need to know? What would you tell them?
Well, one thing is the pay. That's, totally different.
Oh, they're going to be dying to hear about that.
Yeah. And, that's not just, it's just the help, that the union provides each worker with, with
You're getting
the school.
paid more, but how much better are you able to do your job to earn that extra pay, right? It's a different pay raise, but now you feel trained. How much better would you like to tell those people, look, you're going to get better workers if you do that? Is that accurate?
Repeat that again, I'm sorry.
If you can go back to the non-union contractors, the underground, and you can say, look, I'm getting paid a little bit more, but this is how much, would you tell them I'm doing a much better job because I'm better trained now and it's worth it?
Yeah, it's helping me grow, not just stay in the same position and, doing the same exact thing, but learn different types of trades like, framing, metal framing, trimming, all different details that you wouldn't know if you're working a non-union. You're basically doing constantly the same thing, and people don't really grow like that. A lot of guys, they just stay working with the same materials, same thing, and they don't even know if they would like something else. Like the school, it provides us with different knowledges, professional knowledge of like I said, framing, core classes like framing, concrete, metal framing.
Easy on the concrete.
Yeah. I've been working concrete, so it's been great.
Good stuff. All right, John, I'm going to give you the final word.
Wonderful. You wanted to know who should be spoken to. Collectively, we've already spoken to all of the elected officials. They know the issues. Our industry partners know the issues. They've helped convey that message with us. The developers know the issues as well. The person in your first question was, who would you speak to? The workers. They need to understand that they have rights. They need to understand that there's people out there, whether they're elected officials that have taken an oath of office to uphold those rights and to make sure that they protect those workers with the laws that are on the books. That's the most important key here, that they recognize that they have the ability to go to work, to earn a wage, to earn a good living, to be able to go home and be in a safe working environment, and that they're not shouldering the burden. That's not their responsibility. It's just not their responsibility. And that they're not exploited. Because we all recognize in the room, we're all bright people. People don't do this to say, I'm going to elevate Danilo, I'm going to make him a subcontractor. As you heard his first statement, the contractor directed me to go down the stairs to go and get material. He wasn't directing himself. That's the first key. He's not the contractor. So to make sure that they understand their rights, that they understand that they have the ability to be able to go to work, earn a wage, be able to pay the appropriate taxes, and work in a safe working environment. Education is the biggest piece. The most productive workers out there are the most educated workers out there that have training behind them. That's important as well. All of the elected officials know the issues. They know it. They have an obligation. So the people that I would like to speak to, the workers, to educate them, because a collective voice is a strong voice. Those are the people that are electing the officials. Those are the people that it mostly affects. Those are the people that are being exploited. And they are the people that we should be looking after with regards to this study. It's great to say it's terrific for the state and the economics of the industry and level of the playing field. That's great. But it's always back to the workers. Those are the ones that are being taken advantage of and being exploited. We have to study. We have a governor that has embraced workers' rights. He's very much into making sure that there's an educated workforce with regards to vocational education. We have industry partners such as the Association of Construction Contractors that understand the issues and share the same concerns within the industry. You know, we have elected officials that have taken an oath of office to make sure they uphold the laws in the state of New Jersey. Now we need to make sure that the workers are embraced and to make sure that they understand, you know, that there is a better way of life out there for them.
All right, that's great stuff. Once again, I want to thank the people that helped put this event together, from the Northeast Carpenters to the Bricklayers to the contractors to the Carpenters Trust, all of the folks, the education people, the academics. This was really great stuff. We're respectful of your time. We know some people have to go somewhere, but we also invite you to stick around, talk among yourself, talk among the panelists one-on-one. This has been a great event. Look for you. We'll reach out to you with our next ROI event. So with that, thank you very much.